Hello. Welcome back to Steinway Hall. I first discovered Emmet Fox through Chuck Chamberlain's talk, A New Pair of Glasses, when Chuck recommended Fox's little booklet, The Golden Key. I went looking for it and absolutely fell in love with Emmet Fox and include his writings in my morning meditations. In the early days of AA, members often went together after meetings to hear Fox speak at Steinway Hall in New York. Even today, some groups still share his pamphlets alongside AA literature. Old timers remember how widely Fox's writings were used for guidance. Dr. Bob himself frequently recommended Fox's work, along with Henry Drummond's The Greatest Thing in the World. Simple, practical spiritual tools the fellowship relied on before AA had its own literature. Fox taught ideas that blended naturally with what AA was discovering. Change begins by changing your thoughts. Love and forgiveness are central to spiritual growth. Resentment has to be cleared away. Live one day at a time and stay out of the past. He emphasized that thoughts are real things and that you can't have one kind of mind and another kind of life. His focus on love, releasing resentment, and living in the present became woven into AA's earliest spiritual approach, shaping a path that millions in recovery still follow today. I have Heather from Saskatchewan, Canada, with me today, and we're going to discuss Fox's booklet, which, let's see here, the 7-Day Mental Diet. So, the 7-Day Mental Diet, I'm going to read a little bit, and then we're going to both take turns and comment on what was read. So, again, this is one of Fox's little booklets. And this is actually, this is the entire little booklet. So the subject of diet is one of the foremost of the present day in public interests. Newspapers and magazines teem with articles on the subject. The counters of the bookshops are filled with volumes unfolding the mysteries of proteins, starches, vitamins, and so forth. Just now, the whole world is food conscious. Experts on the subject are saying that physically, you become the thing that you eat, that your whole body is really composed of the food that you have eaten in the past. What you eat today, they say, will be in your bloodstream after the lapse of so many hours. And it is your bloodstream that builds all the tissue composing your body. And there you are. Of course, no sensible person has any quarrel with all of this. It is perfectly true as far as it goes. And the only surprising thing is that it has taken the world so long to find it out. But in this pamphlet, I am going to deal with the subject of dieting at a level that is infinitely more profound and far reaching in its effects. I refer, of course, to mental dieting. The most important of all factors in your life is the mental diet on which you live. It is the food which you furnish to your mind that determines the whole character of your life. It is the thoughts you allow yourself to think, the subjects that you allow your mind to dwell upon, which make you and your surroundings what they are. As thy days, so shall thy strength be, which in modern language may be translated as thy thoughts, so shall thy life be. Everything in your life today, the state of your body, whether healthy or sick, the state of your fortune, whether prosperous or impoverished, the state of your home, whether happy or the reverse, the present condition of every phase of your life, in fact, is entirely conditioned by the thoughts and feelings which you have entertained in the past, by the habitual tone of your past thinking and the condition of your life tomorrow and next week and next year will be entirely conditioned by the thoughts and feelings which you choose to entertain from now onward. Heather, do you have any comments on that?
Sure, I can go ahead. Um, yeah, I think, as you were reading this, I was thinking, oh, this was probably published in the 20s or 30s. And it really is true, all of the things that he talks about, how, what, diet and what we eat, etc., really shape us and who we are. And that expands itself into, what we have in our mental diet shapes our thinking and our actions. Um, I think about, Fox probably never would have thought about social media or 24-hour news or any of those things in the time that this is written. But those are the things that we deal with day to day. And I believe they do have a direct impact on, what we think, what we allow our minds to dwell on, and what our surroundings become. And if we're focusing on those things that we see in the news and in our Facebook feeds and social media feeds, that can be a very direct kind of correlation to how we think. Um, the other one I wanted to talk about was, whether happy or the reverse, the present condition of every phase of your life, in fact, is conditioned by the thoughts and feelings you've entertained in the past. And so what that brought up for me was um, I didn't really know what my thoughts and feelings were until I worked the steps in CODA. And I think the fourth and the fifth step really bring out what my thoughts and feelings were about myself, about other people, about the world. And a lot of them were not good. About myself, I thought I was unlovable, I wasn't worthy, I wasn't good enough. And that took up most of my thinking. And I think that's, the blessing and the gift of the fourth and fifth step is this self-awareness about what we think and believe about ourselves and others and the world. And then, yeah, I think I'm going to stop there and I'll pass to you.
Thank you, Heather. So yeah, this really Emmet Fox's booklets really saved my life, basically. Years ago, I was having horrible health issues and was about to, was looking for a way to have my life ended. And I had asked Dave, my partner, if he would take me to Oregon to find a way to peacefully end my life because I just couldn't imagine continuing living in that kind of pain. And we even went to the Cleveland Clinic. And when we came back, I searched one more time on the internet and actually found a blogger in Canada who directed me to a doctor in San Francisco that was talking about a cure, not a cure, but a solution. So it's really interesting because in the 12 steps, we talk about that we are recovered, we're not cured. And it was the same thing for my health issue that there is a path that I can follow and I'll be recovered, but I'm always going to have that health issue. But I really had to turn my thinking hard to different kind of thinking in order to get through that experience. And I still find that I need to do that. So this mental diet, this first paragraph, that is true. I had been doing the really heavily focused on eating well. That was the first thing that I tried to do to feel better. And it's really good, and I'm glad I do it, but it wasn't really touching my illness. So I'm super happy that I was directed, and I think divinely guided to a solution for my health issues. And we of course all know that if you eat junk, it you feel crappy. So it's really also true that if you think junk, you feel crappy. And so this mental diet, I had to really start focusing on, I really believe in that part that says everything in your life today, the state of your body, whether healthy or sick. And that gave me some hope, because I thought, okay, well, maybe this is true. Maybe my thinking might be impacting my health. And so why not try it? I mean, what do I have to lose from at least experimenting with this idea that my thinking might be contributing to my health and my well-being? So I started to read Emmet Fox's literature, and I started to focus on, it says in it, one of his other booklets, The Golden Key, and that was the one that I was first introduced to, is that whatever you do, think of God, think of good, think of love, think of kindness, and in the 12-step program, we think about what we can contribute to life. That is what we turn our attention to and focus on. What can I bring? How can I contribute? So I had to strenuously turn my attention every day, and many times every day, to thinking of good, thinking of, and there are some statements that I would say to myself, like, all is well, little things like that. Every day, in every way, I am better and better and better. And those were two of the little phrases I picked up from Emmet Fox, that I could replace my negative thinking. I could place my sick thinking with healthy thinking, and begin to believe that healthy thinking might actually, be eventually demonstrated, as Emmet Fox talks about it. He calls it a demonstration. When you're out of your difficulty, it might be demonstrated in my actual physical health. And I have gotten better and better. But I'm actually on protocol for my health condition. And that is helping. But in the interim, I have to stay in this, positive mental state, and I have to stay in this place of love. And it also, I really have to work hard around practicing this mental state with other people in my life and situations, I mean, politics and all those kinds of things. I have to make sure that what I'm practicing is this belief that we learn about in the big book, and actually came from Emmet Fox, that God is everything or nothing. What's your choice to be? So what I learned about that was, even things that look bad from my small perspective, I get to choose to practice a belief that God is in it, and that it's all working for good. And it also talks about relationships, that we practice believing that the people that we care about, the people that we're in relationship with, that they too are on a path, that's between them and their source. And that path is one of purpose. And And I know now that my life and even the things that felt bad, looked bad, got me to a place that I needed to get to for things to be able to become better. So I can begin to believe and practice, at least practice believing that that's also true for other people. And let's see. So I do tend to believe now that my thinking is the crux of my problem, but my thinking can also be the crux of my solution. And I pass.
Awesome. Okay, I will go on to the next few paragraphs. In other words, you choose your life. That is to say, you choose all the conditions of your life. When you choose the thoughts upon which you allow your mind to dwell. Thought is the real causative force in life, and there is no other. You cannot have one kind of mind and another kind of environment. This means that you cannot change your environment while leaving your mind unchanged, nor, and this is the supreme key to life and the reason for this pamphlet, you cannot change your mind without, you can. Can you change your mind without your environment changing too? This is when the real key to life. If you can change your mind, your conditions must change too. Your body must change, your daily work or other activities must change, your home must change, the color tone of your whole life must change. For whether you will be habitually happy and cheerful or low spirited and fearful depends entirely on the quality of the mental food upon which you diet yourself. Please be very clear about this. If you change your mind, your conditions must change too. We are transformed by the renewing of our minds. So now you will see that your mental diet is really the most important thing in your whole life. This may be called the great cosmic law, and its truth is seen to be perfectly obvious when once it is clearly stated in this way. In fact, I do not know of any thoughtful person who denies its essential truth. The practical difficulty in applying it, however, arises from the fact that our thoughts are so close to us that it is difficult, without a little practice, to stand back, as it were, and look at them objectively. Yet that is just what you must learn to do. You must train yourself to choose the subject of your thinking at any given time, and also to choose the emotional tone, or what we call the mood that colors it. Yes, you can choose your moods. Indeed, if you could not, you would have no real control over your life at all. Moods habitually entertained produce the characteristic disposition of the person concerned, and it is his disposition that finally makes or mars a person's happiness. You cannot be healthy, you cannot be happy, you cannot be prosperous if you have a bad disposition. If you are sulky or surly or cynical or depressed or superior or frightened, half out of your wits, your life cannot possibly be worth living. Unless you are determined to cultivate a good disposition, you may as well give up all hope of getting anything worthwhile out of life. And it is kinder to tell you very plainly that this is the case. If you are not determined to start in now and carefully select all day the kind of thoughts that you are going to think, you may as well give up all hope of shaping your life into the kind of thing that you want it to be, because this is the only way. And would you like to comment on that passage, Tina?
Sure. Okay, so this first paragraph here, um, this is so radical, really. I mean, I, no one had ever taught me anything like this. The way that I grew up, I just watched people, um, instead of choosing the conditions of their lives, reacting to what was going on in their lives. No real sense of responsibility for it, no real sense of power, no real sense of um, just kind of a constant reaction. So only my desperation brought me to the willingness to even begin to entertain such radical ideas, that this might be worth a try. So, um, so this part about you cannot have one kind of mind and another kind of environment, or another way to say it is one kind of mind and another kind of life. It makes sense when I say it out loud. It's like, well, why didn't I think of that? But it just never occurred to me. So, and yeah, this idea that this is the supreme key to life, um, is seems very important. In the big book of AA, it says that our thinking is the crux of our problem. And I believe that Emmet Fox really influenced that statement, that our thinking, the way what we dwell on in our minds, is really what colors our world and shapes our experience. So, so it's so wonderful to read that the real key to life, if you change your mind, your conditions must change too. When I was at the depths of my health condition and read that, if you can change your mind, your conditions must change too. Um, your body must change. Your daily work or other activities must change. Your home must change. The color tone of your whole life must change. Um, that really gave me some hope, that there was maybe, at least there was an action I could take. However ridiculous it seemed to me at the time, there was action that I could take and try. There was another avenue for me to explore, and what's the harm? If I end up being just as miserable, what did I lose by trying this? And I like how he describes it as the great cosmic law. Um, so, but it's still difficult to apply because we humans have a tendency to let the situations and the things that are going on in our everyday really color our our thinking instead of the other way around. Allow having our thinking set on a decision about what we're going to focus on and having that color our world. We've been kind of dragged around by circumstances and situations. So I was willing to give this a try. And this 7-day mental diet booklet in particular is literally what it says. You decide to give this a 7-day test run and see what comes of it. But he's starting to tell us that you gotta decide when you're going to try this diet. You got to plan for it. You don't just kind of stumble into it. It's because it's going to be pretty rigorous. It's going to be different than anything we've ever done before. So we get to choose. We're going to practice choosing our thinking at any given time, choosing our emotional tone, choosing our mood, choosing you know what our thinking is going to be, and the 12 steps really helped me with that. I mean, especially when I started sponsoring other people, and that's kind of how I used this Emmet Fox step, as I realized that I had a really hard time with my thinking, but I could take actions toward this new kind of thinking. And the actions that I took toward this new kind of thinking was helping others. Because once we get work the 12 steps fast, we get to step 12, and then we carry the message of hope to others. And that was going to be my turn. That was going to be the way that I would turn, because what I learned when I worked at 12 steps are we are people who want to quit and can't, right? So I can't really quit, probably can't even quit my stinking thinking, but I can turn my attention to being helpful and useful. And that gets me reliably connected to God, reliably connected to love, reliably connected to my source. And that's kind of one of the ways that this practice can happen. So, but I completely, this makes such sense to me. This section, you cannot be healthy, you cannot be happy, you cannot be prosperous if you have a bad disposition. If you're sulky or surly or cynical or depressed or superior or frightened half out of your wits, your life cannot be possibly worth living. Unless you are determined to cultivate a good disposition, you may as well give up all hope of getting anything worthwhile out of life. And it is kinder to tell you very plainly that this is the case. So I got to my bottom and I realized that I was toast and that I was out of ideas and I didn't know what to do. And so I did use the 12 steps just exactly like this. I used them as what I turned toward. So what I turned my thinking toward, and particularly that 12th step of being helpful and useful. And that has become a practice that by extension keeps me practicing. Well, it says in the big book about being positive, constructive, and kind. And so that's part of the practice, is that we focus on what's positive, what's constructive, what's kind in this moment. And I pass.
Awesome. Thanks, Tina. Yeah, this section, reminded me of that little verse that goes, watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. And when I hit my bottom, I was at what he described here as sulky, surly, cynical, depressed, superior, and frightened half out of my wits. That was me when I got to my bottom. And my perspective, because he talks about, our mood is habitually entertained. Um, my mood was, and my perspective was always bad. I perceived most things as bad, or I perceived them as bad, things that were going to be bad for me, that they were going to affect me. And I internalized everything through this filter of bad. And it was habitual, just like he talks about there. And so coming into the 12 steps and doing the work of, especially 4 and 5, I think 4 and 5 are a very practical preparation for doing the mental diet, because the mental diet is going to require us to be consciously aware of our thinking. And when I was in the state I was in when I came to this program, my thinking, my head was chaos constantly. And steps 4 and 5 helped me to figure out, okay, why I think this way, what I believe about myself and others and the world. And so now that I have that awareness, then I can be conscious of my thinking. I can know when I am slipping into those negative, judgmental, fear-based, all of those kinds of thoughts. They kind of have now kind of a live wire, and it gets tripped. And so then I can, when I recognize them, I can do that turning that you talked about, Tina. I can turn to an action. I can be helpful and useful. And it tells us that unless you are determined to cultivate a good disposition, so for me to cultivate a good disposition, I have to live in steps 10, 11, and 12. So 10 is for when I fall back and get irritated or disturbed or whatever. It gets me out of that. It requires me in step 10 to identify what character defects I'm living in, which are always around my thinking. But it's where my thinking becomes an action. And I am a compulsive codependent, so I go to codependent behaviors. And it requires me to come up with a new ideal and to turn and be helpful. And so there is the action part of the self awareness. 11, prayer and meditation every day. I use that to prime my brain each day because it needs to be primed again every day with, my prayers, my meditation around what is God's will for me today, and that I may get guidance around that. And then 12, again, is another action where I can turn and be helpful and useful to others. So none of this mental diet has anything to do with our environment and the people and places and stuff around us. This is a complete inside job. And it's inside our head that we have to do the work. Um, yeah, and I'm going to stop there and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Okay. So I think I'll go ahead and read the next section. In short, if you want to make your life happy and worthwhile, which is what God wishes you to make it, you must begin immediately to train yourself in the habit of thought selection and thought control. This will be exceedingly difficult for the first few days, but if you persevere, you will find that it will become rapidly easier. And it is actually the most interesting experiment that you could possibly make. In fact, this thought control is the most thrilling, interesting hobby that anyone could take up. You will be amazed at the interesting things that you will learn about yourself, and you will get results almost from the beginning. Now, many people, knowing this truth, make sporadic efforts from time to time to control their thoughts, but the thought stream begin being so close, as I have pointed out, and the impacts from outside so constant and varied, they do not make very much progress. That is not the way to work. Your only chance is definitely to form a new habit of thought, which will carry you through when you are preoccupied or off your guard, as well as when you are consciously attending to the business. This new thought habit must be definitely acquired, and the foundation of it can be laid within a few days. And the way to do it is this: make up your mind to devote 1 week solely to the task of building a new habit of thought. And during that week, let everything else in life be unimportant as compared with that. If you will do so, then that week will be the most significant week in your whole life. It will literally be the turning point for you. If you do so, it is safe to say that your whole life will change for the better. In fact, nothing can possibly remain the same. This does not simply mean that you will be able to face your present difficulties in a better spirit. It means that the difficulties will go. This is the scientific way to alter your life. And being in accordance with the great law, it cannot fail. Now, do you realize that by working this way, you do not have to change conditions? What happens is that you apply the law and then the conditions change spontaneously. You cannot change conditions directly. You have often tried to do so and failed, but go on the 7 day mental diet and conditions must change for you. You have any thoughts about any of that, Heather?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Tina. Yeah, a couple. Um, First of all, in that first paragraph, it talks about if you want to make your life happy and worthwhile, which is what God wishes for you to make it, you must begin immediately to train yourself in the habit of thought selection and thought control. And for me, that included surrendering to my higher power. Because I think, again, he talks about, our perspective. And as I mentioned before, my perspective was very negative. And it wasn't until I started to work the steps and do the steps, and then on the other side of finishing them, that I realized much of my unhappiness came from the negative thoughts and negative perspective that I had. And so when I would catch myself in those thought patterns or thought loops, I would surrender it to higher power. And, if I was wanting someone to behave in a certain way, I would just stop and say, okay, that's not my job. That's God's job, and turn it over. And then again, turn and be helpful and useful in some other way to someone else. Um, and so that I found, part of my experience with working the steps that came about. Um, and then this whole idea of, it's not the conditions that change, it's us that change. And so, what happened when I started to be aware of my negative and my codependent thinking, and I started to this self awareness journey of what I was thinking at different points in the day and stopping that, um, then my perspective changed, and then my relationships changed. And nothing in those relationships changed other than the way I thought about them. And the way I came to those relationships, whether through love and kindness and tolerance, rather than sulky, surly, cynical, judgmental, all of those things, it made a difference. Those conditions changed. And the only thing that, the only variable that was at work there was me and my changing my own thinking. The only other thing I wanted to comment on was the last sentence in the first paragraph. You will be amazed at the interesting things that you will learn about yourself, and you will get results almost from the beginning. So, going from sulky, surly, cynical, depressed, superior, frightened, what changing my thinking has done is that my mood now is one of peace, calm, contentment, freedom, and joy. Emmet Fox is talking about here, and I think those are the things that God wishes us to make of our life and to be in our life. And I will.
Thank you, Heather. Um, so the first thing I want to comment on is this statement that it says here. Let's see. Um, God wishes you, oh, it says, if you want to make your life happy and worthwhile, which is what God wishes you to make it. So that right there was startling to me because I had a very um, kind of an I'm in trouble view of the world all the time. I just, I think it had to do with the home that I grew up in, and I was always in trouble. Um, and it wasn't me, it was that the people that I was raised with, they were in this constant state of wanting to align me to make them okay. And so that's what I learned. That was the first language that I was introduced to. So this idea that God wishes my life to be happy and worthwhile, wow, that's really good news that God wants us to be happy and wants us to have worthwhile lives, and that we can play a part of that in that. And so the statement in the in recovery in the big book that really was transformational for me was giving rather than getting will become the guiding principle. And my whole upbringing had been watching what happens when you live life trying to get something on the outside to make you feel okay on the inside. It was futile, and it was, it was miserable. It was this kind of scarcity mentality. But what the book says about giving rather than getting, I mean, that is basically what this is all about. It's all about, now what I'm trying to do is I'm checking in with my source, however I define that source. And I chose in the beginning for that to just basically be love, not romantic love, but just goodwill and caring, kind of the way that I felt about my children automatically. I was really fortunate. When I had children, I just automatically loved them. I didn't have to work at it. It just was a gift that came when they were born. And I got to experience this caring about someone, and wanting what was best for them, even if it meant not pleasing them. So when they became teenagers, there was times when it was important for me to make decisions that they didn't end up being happy with. But this higher love idea, this giving rather than getting idea, was really helpful. I didn't have the idea at that time, but I had it internally. And basically what that is love. I really genuinely cared about them and their future and their well-being, and I made decisions based on that love. And so it was easy for me to do it, and it was thrilling, just like it says here. It was thrilling to um, practice that giving to give, caring to care, loving to love. And what was miraculous about it is that, being self-conscious, it was, Heather brought up what we do, and we do the fifth and we see our defects. We also see our old ideas. Many of us have brought old ideas like, I'm a piece of crap, I got nothing to offer, I'm unlovable, I'm valueless, et cetera, which is just old, very old. They predate us. They usually come from previous generations. And but when we get to take a look at what those old ideas really are and then turn them into new ideals, the truth about all of us is that we are loving children of God who are here to make a contribution. So in the 12 and 12, it talks about that we are intelligent agents of God's ever expanding creation. So when I started to view myself from a place of value like that, I mean, that's a very valuable role, right? That being an intelligent agent instead of being valueless, it really turned things around for me. And I would begin to, prior to going to family functions or to gatherings of any kind, ask my higher power, ask love, what would you have me contribute to this situation? What would you have me contribute to this encounter? And so I began to see that that was um, a wonderful way to live, this giving to give thing. And so that's really what my mental diet, that's what I started to practice in my mental diet. And it made a dramatic change when I started practicing it. Um, and it was like, it was magic in a way. It didn't matter what interaction I was going into, as long as I was looking for what I could bring instead of what I could take out of it, it was good. It's just, it was really kind of magical. And, but the big book, the 12 and 12 also says something like, um, something about we have great pleasure and great suffering, that those are our disciplinarians and we need no others. So it's like I didn't stay there, right? But it was really important to do this 1 week thing to give me a taste that was even a possibility to have your own insides have an impact around on your surroundings, because I had been thinking that my surroundings were in charge my whole life, and this gave me the perspective that maybe I might be able to have an impact, if only on myself. I mean, I'd go into a situation with a lot of miserable people, and I would bring love and I would bring kindness, and I would leave unscathed, and I would still have the kindness and the love. And maybe it helped somebody else, certainly helped me, but I started noticing that. I can remember one of the biggest examples in the very beginning of this. I remember going to a wedding, a family wedding. And I was consciously practicing this bringing, contributing. And prior to that time, situations like that, I was in self doubt. I was in self loathing. I was in self consciousness. Mostly, I was in self obsession. What do people think of me? The whole time I was in, what can I add? What can I contribute? And I didn't have to think about myself the entire time. And it was a huge relief to not have to be thinking about that all the time, just worrying about what are people thinking of me. It was transformative. So is it my turn to read? No, I think it's your turn to read, right? Or did you comment? I can't read. I got lost.
No, I commented.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, you read. It's my turn to read. All right. So this then is your prescription for 7 days. You must not allow yourself to dwell for a single moment on any kind of negative thought. You must watch yourself for a whole week as a cat watches a mouse. And you must not, under any pretense, allow your mind to dwell on any thought that is not positive, constructive, optimistic, kind. This discipline will be so strenuous that you could not maintain it consciously for more than a week. But I do not ask you to do so. A week will be enough, because by that time the habit of positive thinking will begin to be established. Some extraordinary changes for the better will have to come into your life, encouraging you enormously, and then the future will take care of itself. The new way of life will be so attractive and so much easier than the old way. that you will find your mentality aligning itself almost automatically. But the 7 days are going to be strenuous. I would not have you enter upon this without counting the cost. Mere physical fasting would be child's play in comparison, even if you have a very good appetite. The most exhausting form of army gymnastics, combined with 30-mile route marches, would be mild in comparison with this undertaking. But it is only for 1 week in your life, and it will definitely alter everything for the better. For the rest of your life here, for all eternity, in fact, things will be utterly different and inconceivably better than if you had not carried through this undertaking. Do not start it lightly. Think about it for a day or two before you begin, and then start in, and the grace of God go with you. You may start it any day in the week and at any time in the day, first thing in the morning or after breakfast or after lunch. It does not matter. But once you start, you must go right through for the 7 days. This is essential. The whole idea is to have 7 days of unbroken mental discipline in order to get the mind definitely bent in a new direction once and for all. If you make a false start, or even if you go on well for 2 or 3 days and then for any reason fall off the diet, the thing to do is to drop the scheme altogether for several days and then to start again afresh. There must be no jumping on and off, as it were. You remember the Rip Van Winkle in the play? Remember that Rip Van Winkle in the play would take a solemn vow of teetotalism and then promptly accept a drink from the first neighbor who offered him one, saying calmly, "I won't count this one." Well, on the 7 day mental diet, this sort of thing simply will not do. You must positively count every lapse, and whether you do or not, nature will. Where there is a lapse, you must go off the diet altogether and then start again. And would you like to comment?
Thank you, Heather. So, my actual practice with this is that I did have to um, stop and pause and then restart again several times before I got a whole week in. And and it and it didn't, I don't want to pretend like that changed everything. What it did for me was it woke me up to what this could do for me. And it was a very, it says positive, optimistic, constructive, and kind. It was a very powerful um, exercise to see that my thinking could impact my life in a positive way. But mostly for me, again, because I'm a person who wants to quit and can't. That's why I work 12-step program. I have to take action, so I have to take positive, constructive action, not just thinking. It can't stop with me in thinking. I've got to find, what can I contribute to this moment? What can I add? But what this did for me was it started me down that path of even believing that a higher power could have a plan and purpose for my life. That and it's and that really helped me with my prayer and meditation, um, to begin to believe that every morning, like Heather mentioned, in my 11th step, I get to, what I do is I jot down things that I'm not quite sure how to handle. And then I trust that my higher power is going to guide me around that, but I'm not going to sit there and fuss with it, right? I'm not going to pick at it like a scab or something. I'm going to completely let it go and turn to the things I do know how to do that day. But it's remarkable how I'll get an intuitive thought or decision around other things. And that has really changed things for me. What came out of this 7 day mental diet for me that was the most remarkable and encouraging is that God wants to bring good to the world through me. That was something I'd never ever considered, and that opened up all kinds of positive, constructive options for me to take, because my definition of higher power when I started this was good and love. So it would be basically saying, what would good have me do today? What would love have me do today? Or what would good have me do in this situation? Or what would love have me do in this situation? And it just changed my way from that getting to giving perspective. And then I started to experience the nearness of my source, and I pass.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, a couple of things come up for me in these two, few paragraphs is about, I had to become consciously aware of my thinking. Um, And, my thinking was just like a tape recorder that ran on and on and on and on. And, it was, this is bad and he's bad. And, they don't like me. And why can't this be this way? Why isn't so and so doing this way? And that tape recorder was what got me to my bottom because I couldn't ever shut it off. It ran 24/7 all the time. And so, like Emmet Fox tells us, our mental health deteriorates, our physical health deteriorates, everything starts to go wonky. But once I got to the point where I was, doing this, and it was through the 12 steps where I was consciously self-aware of my thinking. And when I had those thoughts that made me irritable, restless, and discontented, I had a tool. I had the 10th step to do. And that 10th step got me on track to say, okay, this is my character defects and what's coming out. And this is what the old belief that's coming up again. And what is my new ideal? And the new ideal was always the action to take, to turn from those negative thoughts. And it was really helpful. But I do remember, being just newly finished the steps and it's like being on the 7 day mental diet when you finish the steps and you start to practice these principles in all your affairs and practice the tools of the program. It is strenuous because you're always in your thought. You're always assessing your thoughts, or I was anyway, um, around what I was thinking. I had a new awareness of higher power, a new awareness of wanting to be guided by higher power in my thoughts and my words and my deeds throughout the day. And so, yeah, it was strenuous. I found it strenuous anyway because I was, yeah, oh, there's a negative thought. Oh, okay, what do I do with that negative thought? I turn that over to higher power. When I can't turn it over, then I'm doing a 10th step or whatever. And so I agree with the idea about it being strenuous. The good news is that over time it becomes easier. The 24 hours of a day thinking negative thoughts um, starts to lessen. I found, it talks about in this 6th and 7th step how, our character defects, when we turn them over, some of them are removed subtly. And, a lot of my obsessive thinking was around my health, around, whether, what I had was terminal. Lots of times I think I had cancer, and I knew all of that came from, again, from my past. But all of those things started, all of that was quieted. And then I could, then in the space of those quiet times, I got to do the things where I did bring love and what did they talk about? And so on, kindness and tolerance and patience. And I could bring those things. And I really think it is a very miraculous thing that we can go from that 24-hour self-obsessing, ruminating thinking to a peaceful, calm, focused, directed by higher power thinking and in turn actions. And I will pass there, and I think it's your turn to read.
Yep. Thank you, Heather. So now, in order, if possible, to forestall difficulties, I will consider them in a little detail. First of all, what do I mean by negative thinking? Well, a negative thought is any thought of failure, disappointment, or trouble. Any thought of criticism or spite or jealousy or condemnation of others or self condemnation. Any thought of sickness or accident, or in short, any kind of limitation or pessimistic thinking. Any thought that is not positive and constructive in character, whether it concerns you yourself, or anyone else. It is a negative thought. Do not bother too much about the question of classification. However, in practice, you will never have any trouble in knowing whether a given thought is positive or negative. Even if your brain tries to deceive you, your heart will whisper the truth. Second, you must be quite clear that what this scheme calls for is that you shall not entertain or dwell upon negative things. Note this carefully. It is not the thoughts that come to you that matter, but only such of them as you choose to entertain and dwell upon. It does not matter what thoughts may come to you, provided you do not entertain them. It is the entertaining or dwelling upon them that matters. Of course, many negative thoughts will come to you all day long. Some of them will just drift into your mind of their own accord, seemingly, and these come to you out of the race mind. Other negative thoughts will be given to you by other people, either in conversation or by their conduct, or you will hear disagreeable news, perhaps by letter or telephone, or you will see crimes and disasters announced in the newspaper headings. These things, however, do not matter as long as you do not entertain them. In fact, it is these very things that provide the discipline that is going to transform you during this epic making week. The thing to do is directly the negative thought presents itself, turn it out. Turn away from the newspaper. Turn out the thought of the unkind letter or stupid remark or whatnot. When the negative thought floats into your mind, immediately turn it out and think of something else. Best of all, think of God, as explained in the Golden Key. A perfect analogy is furnished by the case of a man who is sitting by an open fire when a red hot cinder flies out and falls on his sleeve. If he knocks that cinder off at once without a moment's delay to think about it, no harm is done. But if he allows it to rest on him for a single moment, under any pretense, the mischief is done, and it will be a troublesome task to repair that sleeve. So it is with a negative thought. You have any comments?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Tina. Yeah, I think what stood out for me, and it's mentioned twice, one sentence right after the other, pretty much, is only such of them as you choose to entertain and dwell upon. And entertaining or dwelling upon them, that it is the entertaining or dwelling upon them that matters. And so I really appreciate this kind of practical application, action that he's describing here. And he's not saying you're never going to have negative thoughts again. He's saying when those negative thoughts show up, you have the choice of whether to entertain them or not. So if you choose to entertain them, in my experience, it's going to be miserable and fear-based and anger, etc. But you can choose to turn away from them. You don't have to entertain them. And instead you can think, oh, what tells us, turn it out and think of something else. And I think that the program, it tells us not only just to think of something else, but to do something else. And if we do that, then we get to continue to live in this, place that God wishes for us, this place of peace and harmony and joy and contentment. But, if we choose not to, if we choose to entertain the thought, ruminate on it, think about it over and over, it's going to bring us misery. And our misery takes us right back to, where we were before this program or the 12-step program or anything else. So it's always that choice. And I'll pass.
Thank you, Heather. I like that he gives us a list of examples right off the top. Any thought of failure, disappointment, trouble, criticism, spite, jealousy, condemnation of others, self-condemnation, any thought of sickness, accident, any kind of limitation or pessimistic thinking, any thought that is not positive and constructive in nature. And that positive and constructive reminds me of the seventh step prayer. My creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you move from me. Oh, that's the third. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou will. So that is really what started transforming things for me, is this idea, even though I didn't have a higher power in the beginning of working the 12 steps, what I had was this knowledge that the 12 steps had been saving people's lives since the 30s. So that was my higher power in the beginning, the actual work of the 12 steps. So I did have that. And but what I got to start practicing was this, you know, what can I be and do today that God or higher power or love would have me be and do in this 24 hours? That's what I would start turning my thinking. Instead of that negative list, I would turn toward what would God have me be and do in this 24 hours. And then all sorts of really interesting things started popping into my head of things I could do. You know, it was like, wow, I've been wasting all of my precious thought energy on just trying to eke out a miserable living in an unfriendly universe, trying to defend against imagined things. But when I turned my thinking toward, oh, this higher power, this source wants to build things with me and do things with me, that made life exciting. It's like I started I had a new pair of glasses. That's another thing that they talk about in the program, is we put on this new pair of glasses where all of a sudden we're looking at the world in this light of, what is higher power? What does love want to build with me and do with me, instead of how am I going to eke out a miserable living in an unfriendly universe? It's a completely different perspective. And so, and then I like that it's not that we're perfect. It's not that we're not going to have, jealousy or, any of those kinds of things. It's just that I'm not going to give them my power. And the thing that we do in program is we turn and do a 10th step, or we turn and reach out to someone that we can be helpful and useful to. So in the beginning, I noticed that during my work day, I could always stay focused and my mind wasn't trying to kill me. But the instant that I got off work, my my mind would jump on me, like a crazy person. And all of that stuff, that list of horrible things to dwell in, um, just trouble, criticism, spite, jealousy, condemnation would attack me. So what I did in the beginning, when I was just newly working the 12 steps, I would go to meetings, I would offer to sponsor people, I would take the name and number of newcomers, and then I would text sometimes up to 25 people on my walk after work and just say, hello, glad you found us. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to help. And I would just do that over and over and over. I would save it in my notes so that I wouldn't have to even type it again. And I would just send it, send it, send it, send it, send it, send it, send it. So for me, just like was mentioned by Heather, I am a person who isn't going to be able to lasso my thinking and whip it into shape. I have to um, take this positive, constructive action. And that's one of the things that it says in the big book on our promises. It says the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands are better than anything we could have planned. So my job, because I'm a person with a spiritual malady, is I got to put myself in God's hands. That's the only safe place for me. And so I've got to be taking those positive, constructive actions all the time. And especially anytime my thinking gets squirrely in the way that he's so beautifully described here in that long list of things that we also see when we do our fourth and fifth step, this condemnation and criticism and spite and jealousy and thinking about sickness or illness or any kind of pessimistic thinking. I didn't know how full my life was of it. And I didn't know that it was I actually had tried in program for about 15 to 20 years to change my thinking without doing any actions. I tried that. And that didn't work for me. The only thing that worked for me, because I'm a person with a spiritual malady, is to take the actions of the 12 steps and to get to that 12th step as soon as possible and to turn my attention to how I can be helpful and useful each day and what I could contribute to life and to say that seventh step prayer every day and just have this joyful kind of expectation that God wants to use me to build something great every day. And let's see, is it my turn to read or is it your turn to read?
My turn.
Okay, great.
Now, what of those negative thoughts and conditions which it is impossible to avoid at the point where you are today? What of the ordinables that you will have to meet in the office or at home? The answer is that such things will not affect your diet, provided you do not accept them. By fearing them, by believing them, by being indignant or sad about them, or by giving them any power at all. Any negative condition that duty compels you to handle will not affect your diet. Go to the office or meet the cares at home without allowing them to affect you. None of these things move me, and all will be well. Suppose that you are lunching with a friend who talks negatively. Do not try to shut him up or otherwise snub him. Let him talk, but do not accept what he says, and your diet will not be affected. Suppose that on coming home, you are greeted with a lot of negative conversation. Do not preach a sermon, but simply do not accept it. It is your mental diet, your mental consent, remember, that constitutes your diet. Suppose you witness an accident or an act of injustice, let's say. Instead of reacting by accepting the appearance and responding with pity or indignation, refuse to accept the appearance at its face value. Do anything that you can to right matters, give it the right thought, and let it go at that. You will still be on the diet. Of course, it will be very helpful if you can take steps to avoid meeting during this week anyone who seems particularly likely to arouse the devil in you. People who get on your nerves or rub you up the wrong way or bore you are better avoided while you are on the diet. But if it is not possible to avoid them, then you must take a little extra discipline. That is all. Suppose that you have a particularly trying ordeal before your next week. Well, if you have enough spiritual understanding, you will know how to meet that in the spiritual way. But for our present purpose, I think I would wait and start the diet as soon as the ordeal is over. As I said before, do not take up the diet lightly, but think it over well first. In closing, I want to tell you that people often find that the starting of this diet seems to stir up all sorts of difficulties. It seems as though everything begins to go wrong at once. This may be disconcerting, but it is really a good sign. It means that things are moving and is not that the very object we have in view. Suppose your whole world seems to rock on its foundations. Hold on steady, let it rock, and when the rocking is over and the picture will have reassembled itself into something much nearer to your heart's desire. The above point is vitally important and rather subtle. Do you not see that the very dwelling upon these difficulties is in itself a negative thought, which was probably thrown you which has probably thrown you off the diet? The remedy is not, of course, to deny that your world is rocking in appearance, but to refuse to take the appearance for the reality. Judge not according to appearances, but judge righteous judgment. Keep your thoughts positive, optimistic, and kindly while the outer picture is rocking. Keep it so in spite of any appearances, and a glorious victory is certain. Every side of your life will radically alter for the better. A closing word of caution. Do not tell anyone else that you are on the diet or that you intend to go on it. Keep this tremendous project strictly to yourself. Remember that your soul should be the secret place of the Most High. When you have come through the 7 days successfully and secured your demonstration, allow a reasonable time to elapse to establish the new mentality, and then tell the story to anyone else whom you think is likely to be helped by it. And finally, remember that nothing said or done by anyone else can possibly throw you off the diet. Only your own reaction to the other person's conduct can do that. And would you like to comment, Tina?
Yeah, thank you, Heather. So, let's see. So this idea of giving things power was really helpful to me, that whatever I am dwelling on, I'm giving power. Whatever I give my attention to, I'm giving power to. So I just get to, it's kind of like if, I envision a lunch line where you're taking your tray and you're going through and you're getting the food that you want to get. It's like, what am I wanting my day to be like? So I get to start being more selective about what I am putting on my life plate. Um, so let's see. And I really like this example of, because most of us have had lives where we've spent our lives gossiping about others or criticizing others. I mean, that is a substitute for genuine intimacy, right? And many of us came from dysfunctional families, and we didn't have examples of healthy intimacy, so we partook in the only place that there was available to partake. And so most of our lives are full of relationships where this kind of thing goes on. And this is a big thing. When I sponsor other people, I have to tell them about how that started to transform in my life. And the steps that I took around that was, I just, the first, a hierarchy of desist moves is the way I like to think about it. So the first move is I just don't say anything. I just let there be dead air. And that is such a powerful thing to do. It's just like, it's amazing how things just kind of wind down pretty quickly when it's not stoked by someone else, you know, and then if it continues, then I can um, kindly say, I can't speak about those not present. And well, no, the next one is to change the subject. That's the second in the hierarchy, is to change the subject. And if it keeps going, then I can say, I'm sorry, I can't speak about those not present, or it's not good for me to talk about people who aren't present, whatever. Um, I think saying it's not good for me is probably the best approach, because it I own it. I own that it's not good for me. Doesn't mean it's not going to be good for you, but it isn't good for me. So I just can't do it. So that has been super helpful. And then it says sometimes we may have to, and I have found that the people in my life over the years that I've been working the 12 steps have become more and more my spiritual tribe. You know what I mean? That we more and more, just nobody talks about others. You know, it's just not something that we do together. So it at least those that I work 12 steps with, and, you know, those kinds of things. And it just makes life so wonderful. It's like whenever I would gossip about someone else, I would come away feeling like I had just put on a very dirty coat. You know, it just felt icky and heavy. And so I don't have to spend time feeling like that anymore. The other thing that's been really helpful for me, part of this diet, is to stay in this 24 hours. You know, so much of my life was spent imagining icky stuff or dwelling on icky stuff. So the guidance that I was given was to stay in now, like this 24 hours. If I want to be with higher power, if I want to be with love, the only place that higher power and love can be found are in this 24 hours. So stay in love, stay with higher power, and that means staying in now. And then stay in reality. So if I'm making up a story, and I didn't even know that pretty much I was always making up a story. I mean, I didn't realize that my mind was always doing that. And now I it's such a relief. And I was in chronic anxiety, and it's no surprise that I was in chronic anxiety because I was terrifying myself with these scary stories in my own head. And then when I didn't have to do that anymore, and I want to give us all a break here, cut us all some slack. I mean, this is what we were raised in. This is the snowball that's been rolling down the hill for multiple generations. So we all came by it honestly, right? But we don't have to stay there anymore. I don't have to stay in making up scary stories in my head. I don't have to stay in making up ugly stories in my head. I don't have to be uh, projecting disaster, or projecting, you know, just the simple thing of they're not going to like me, changing it to they're going to like me. I'm going to like them. Actually, that I'm going to like them, or I'm going to find something to like about them, is such a wonderful way to go into a situation. So that whole thing of what can I contribute instead of what I can get out of it is important. And I did have this experience that's described in the closing. When I started this diet, it felt like everything was rocking. It felt things got worse. And I love that it said this, because it actually did, in fact, happen. And this idea, let it rock. And then when it's done rocking, the picture that has reassembled itself is something much nearer to your own heart's desire. I mean, that is, in fact, what I experienced. And let's see. So keeping your thoughts positive, optimistic, and I like the word constructive, and kind. Those are just four simple words for me. Is it positive? Is it constructive? Is it optimistic? Is it kind? That I can ask myself whenever there's some thinking going on that kind of raises one of my eyebrows, you know, like, and I can just look and see. And now, when I'm in spots where my thinking is not really helpful or good for me, I don't have to hang out in it as long. I notice it quicker because I'm getting a higher um, quality of life, and I expect to be continuing to living in this higher quality of life. And when something dampens it, I'm much more quicker to go to, oh, what's going on in my head? What's going on in my thinking? And adjust that. And I pass.
Awesome. Thanks, Tina. Yeah, though, I really, that last sentence, only your own reaction to other people's conduct can throw you off the diet. And I think, what he spends this last part of the piece talking about is, so what do you do? Because we can't live in a silo, we can't isolate. We have families, we have jobs, we have friends, we have extended family, we have community members. So you're going to have to live this 7 day diet around other people. And so, what happens when you run into people who are gossiping? And he tells us, you don't do anything. Let him talk, but do not accept what he says. And I think that is kind of a surrender in itself, is surrendering to let other people live their own experience, and empowering in the fact that I don't have to be there. And as a codependent, I think that was the difficult part, because that gossiping situation could quickly turn into a codependence, wanting to, like you said, Tina, connect or get love or get accepted or whatever. But we don't have to go along with the crowd. And the same about, life will begin rocking. And a lot of it could be around the idea that when we start to change our behavior and our countenance and our thinking, it can make people uncomfortable, and that's okay. It's okay that other people are uncomfortable when we go on this mental diet. And, like it was, your thinking becomes your words become your actions become your habits, and so on. So when those things are going to start changing, that it might shake people up a little bit, and that's okay. And the third last paragraph there, where it was keep your thoughts positive, optimistic, kindly. Um, two is that realize everything's going to happen in God's time. It's not going to be, I can do the 1 hour mental diet and I'm all good and I'm there. It's all of this is a journey and a progression, and it takes time. So, don't throw your arms up. If it doesn't work after a day or whatever, don't have expectations about what the outcome is going to be and what the outcome is going to look like. And yeah, I think it's really, yeah, a powerful piece. I think we can all, take something from this, some seeds of, um, especially for us addicts that have that compulsive behavior and that compulsive thinking. There's really some good, practical, actionable advice and knowledge in this piece. And I will pass.
Thank you so much, Heather, for joining me on Steinway Hall, Emmet Fox, and the 12 Steps. It's been a pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.